All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to day 2 of Monumental. My name's David Rosenthal, and I'm here from Cincinnati, Ohio, representing a nonprofit organization called Prairie Inc. And I'm here along with Janelle Shunk, Maggie Engelman, and Brittany Toms, also from Cincinnati, Ohio. And we're here to share a little bit about a program that has been going on in Cincinnati since 2009. Called New Voices. New Voices is a photography program that engages high school students in the community in a very specific way. But before I say too much about the program, and these guys are going to talk about their experience in 2 particular programs over the last couple of years. Before we get to that point, I wanted to throw out a discussion question for you all, just to start thinking about how artistic work can be service. I just want to give a really brief recap of the program since 2009, how it got started, and what we've done since then. So back in 2009, in the city of Cincinnati, where we're all from, there's a school in our downtown area called the School for Creative and Performing Arts. It's a very unique program. It's one of the only K through 12 performing arts schools in the whole country, and it's located in our inner city downtown area. Cincinnati is a very segregated city, like so many of our inner cities, old cities in the US. And the area where it's located is historically African American, socioeconomically kind of depressed. Back in 2009, there was a plan that came about through this organization, private organization, to build a new school also in our historic downtown area, but with one major difference, which was that the new school was going to be right next door to the biggest homeless shelter in the city of Cincinnati, called the Drop-In Center. It's one shelter in the city of Cincinnati that actually never turns people away during certain periods of time. So it's the biggest shelter in the city of Cincinnati. Being a racially divided city, this was very, very controversial. The folks who were raising $40 million to build a new building didn't see any problem with moving it next to the homeless shelter. Parents were on the other side of this equation, very, very up in arms. A lot of really inflammatory, divisive kind of chatter going on in our city. So, and it was all over the news, all over social media, very divisive. My reaction as an art teacher was, working with kids, was where is the voice of the students in this whole debate? This is an issue that actually involves students. They're the ones who are going to be impacted by this move of the new building next to the drop-in center. So what do they think about it? And beyond that, where is the voice of the folks who are experiencing homelessness in this whole debate? Why are they being left out of this debate? They were completely unheard in this whole situation. So this was the first program that I did back in 2009. I took students from SCPA using photography. They went into the homeless shelter working one-on-one over the course of 10 weeks with residents at the shelter. And they worked with the same folks week after week after week, which was really important in establishing a relationship, taking photographs of the area around the shelter, which, while it's sort of an area that's very depressed and needs a lot of renovation, it's one of our most historic and beautiful areas in the city of Cincinnati, so there's amazing things to photograph in that area. So we use the photography as a jumping off point for conversation about this very divisive issue. And just as you all were talking about a minute ago, how photography can communicate, somebody talked about bridging ideas. This is what we did with photography, with the students and the folks at the homeless shelter. These are high school students. Yeah, and they were actually creative writing students. They were not photography students. So photography was kind of a new medium for them, and I just put it in their hands, and we use very simple visual prompts to get started. The end of the program We had an exhibit at the Miami University Center for Community Engagement, which is in downtown Cincinnati. The students did all their own promotion. They made postcards. They came up with a title for the exhibit, Take Another Look, which I thought was a really poetic way of asking the community to re-examine this issue in light of all these new ideas that the students were bringing to the table. Made posters and had a really nice public reception for the work. Beyond that, the students also wrote letters to the editor of our local newspaper, and they wrote letters to their own parents, to the parent committee at the school, asking them to reconsider this issue in light of their own opinions. So it was a really interesting way for students to become involved in the community, to become advocates for a very specific issue. And not all of them agreed, by the way. They didn't all agree that the school should move or not move. So that was another interesting outcome from this. So the service, getting back to art as a service, was the students connecting with the folks at the shelter. That was our main service. And this is where artistic work, I think, is a little bit of an oddball in community service, in service learning, because we're not providing food, we're not providing shelter, we're not providing material, things like that. We're providing a voice for the folks that we work with and a way for them to express their opinions, which is very, very empowering. The other thing that we do is when we finish our projects, we give all of the material, the photographs, the transcripts, the video, whatever we've produced, we give that to the agency, which then uses that as a way to explain who they are in the world. So it's almost like marketing material for the agency. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Brittany and Maggie, who are going to talk about their specific work in 2 of the programs, so you get a better idea of what it's about. Yes, ma'am. The issue had been sort of brewing for about 2 years before we got involved. It's a very, very big project. A guy who was an artistic director of the Cincinnati Pops in Cincinnati was the guy who spearheaded the whole thing, and it was a very big project. Like I said, it was a $40 million project. So he got it started, then the controversy started, and just escalated for about 2 years before we got involved. Our program was about 4 months and took place once a week during the school day, during one period during the school day. Yeah, the school that I worked with, which is SCPA, has a requirement for students that they call practicum, and it requires the students to do something outside of the school which engages their work in the curriculum. So they were initially looking at it as something that was just part of their school day. And like I said, it happened during the school day. Most of the work that I do and have done since then is after school. So, you know, in terms of getting students engaged in the project, you know, I think that you have to talk to them about what they're going to get at the end of it. So, you know, for fine art students, they get a portfolio out of it. A lot of times they have 2 or 3 things they can put on a resume. They can say that they were involved in a public exhibit. Some of them write articles for the newspaper. A lot of them use this for their college essays. Janelle is going to talk about that in just a minute.
I did New Voices my senior year, which is this year, and I got to go down to the drop-in center every Tuesday with a group of girls and Miss Shunk. And my partner was Amber. She is on the right-hand side in the Ohio State sweatshirt, and her friend Michelle. This was actually the first day I met Amber. We went to we went to Memorial Hall, and we got to take pictures, and you can see her picture right here she took. Photography kind of brought us together at first because it was kind of awkward because we didn't know each other at all, and taking this photo actually kind of made her realize it wasn't like your typical white girl that from like the suburbs. She really liked me, and we talked. We had like a conversation on these chairs. we shot totally differently. She probably, I don't know if she's ever picked up a camera before this time, but you can tell I've had training because I took photography classes, and she probably, I don't know if she ever did or she probably forgot because it's been a while. I would get on the ground to take photos and get like a subject in my shot, and she'd take more like a tourist shot, like straight on, and just would zoom in really close, and you couldn't like really get a good photo. And then at the end, we would just go over our photos. This is Amber's photo of the first day we met of a piano. That was her favorite photo she took that day. And then, as you can tell, I was on the ground for this one for my red chairs. I shot down. I like laid on the ground physically to take the picture. But I use more like technical photography terms when we were talking about the photos, like subjects and like the composition of photos, and she'd be like, ooh, I like this because of the piano in the picture. Me and Amber had a breakthrough moment one day when we went down on Tuesday. We went to the drop-in center, and instead of going out and sightseeing to take pictures, we stayed upstairs where we met our partners every day. And David told us we were taking silhouettes, as you can tell, as my silhouette on the left. And we had questions to answer. He gave us a paper with different types of questions we had to talk. It was me and my friend Ashley and Amber, and we all had to answer the question. It's like a recorder. So it started off simple of like, where are you from? Do you have siblings? And Amber has siblings, and so do I. And she's from Michigan, and I'm from Ohio. And then it kind of like got into the questions of like, how did you experience homelessness and how did you become there? And Amber became homeless when she was living in an apartment with friends. The apartment came condemned, so they all had to leave, and she didn't have enough money to live on her own, so she was forced to live on the streets. It was rough for her because for a good 2 weeks, she only had water to drink, which, if you could imagine just drinking water for 2 weeks and not having any of your snacks, which that could be pretty rough. But one touching story that Amber told me was when she was on the streets, she was walking along, and she saw a mom and 2 kids on the streets living, and she only had a little bit of change in her pocket, and she took everything she had and gave it to them, which I thought that was big of her because she already didn't have anything, and she gave what little she had to someone who didn't have anything because of the kids, and she didn't want them to struggle because that could be very traumatic for little kids. And then we also connected of like what kind of schools we go to, because I was wearing my college shirt that day, and she's like, oh, are you guys going to college? And I said, yeah, I'm going to Ohio University. And she goes, oh, I went to college too. I went to NKU. So it was like, we're not totally different people. We are the same, because she hasn't always been experiencing homelessness. And then we got into who are our heroes, and she told me her mom was her hero. And I told her, she told me her mom was her hero, and I told her my mom and my brother are my heroes in life. And she told me that she hasn't seen her mom in 2 years because her mom is currently living in Michigan still. And me and Amber both share similarities. We have struggles in life every day. I'm dyslexic, and she was experiencing homelessness at the time. So those are struggles we have to go through every day because I struggle with learning every day in the classroom and struggled with not having a home to go to every night, not having her own place to stay every day to go home to privacy. As we talked throughout the Tuesdays, the women were really religious. They loved God. They always talked about God did everything for them. God helped them out, which was kind of cool because you got to see how other people are religious than like you. And you can tell in our silhouette, this is Carrie, and she's posing with the Bible. So also their religion also showed through their artwork. And then I also share New Voices through Instagram. We threw a Halloween party for the women who lived in the drop, and they loved it. We all dressed up as superheroes, and they dressed up with their masks. I was the Hulk, and I put on Instagram and told them how much I love my New Voices partner and how New Voices changed me. And then I still connect with Amber today. I poke her on Facebook, I message her, and we still text, and my sister was giving her couch away because she's not experiencing homelessness anymore, so you guys know. So we took the couch to her new place so she would have furniture to watch TV on and eat dinner. But it was a really good experience. But I'm going to give it to my friend Maggie now.
Hi guys, guys. As she said, I'm Maggie. I'm a current junior at Milford High School, and I'm going to talk to you more about the relationship I formed with my partner. So I did it last fall, as a sophomore. When I first found out I was going to be part of New Voices, I was really scared. I was really overwhelmed, kind of set in where I was going. I was going to this inner city place. I was going to be working with homeless people, especially men, and it was a little bit scary. And when I was on the bus the first time, I was very nervous, taking deep breaths, trying to not have these misconceptions, but they were kind of creeping in. But the first time I stepped into City Gospel Mission, it was even more nerve-wracking and very exciting at the same time. We kind of got a glimpse of what we were going to be doing. We didn't meet our partners, but we got to meet the men individually, kind of know where they were coming from. The second week, I met my partner. His name was Mike. He was from Wisconsin, a math teacher, and he had alcohol addiction problems. That was about all I learned of him because I showed up one week and he did not. But instead I met Larry, and Larry and I clicked in a way that Mike and I did not. We just kind of had this relationship. You click with some people and you don't with others, and that's kind of how it worked. We started sharing a little bit about ourselves. He told me about his faith, and I told him about mine. And he told me that there was a reason he was here today, that he could have died years ago, and there was a reason he did not. And he believed it was so he could meet all these high schoolers, kind of tell them why not to do these things, provide an example. He told me about his family. He started out as a pretty good kid. He had all the right stuff. He wasn't like an inner city child. He lived in the suburbs, but he just got a little mixed up, or as he calls it, he turned into a punk. And he started stealing cars, drinking, doing alcohol, pretty much anything he could get his hands on that he wasn't able to escape later in his life. But we talked about it, and I learned a lot through that. So we live outside of Milford, you are outside of Cincinnati, which is about 30 minutes depending on traffic, and it can be sometimes as long as 45 minutes to an hour. And so we had a lot of time on the bus to spend with our other Milford students, and we kind of used that time to figure out what everybody else was going through. It can be very overwhelming at first. When you meet these people, they're telling you a lot, and it's sometimes hard to digest. And so you talk to your other participants, and they are telling you a lot of information too that kind of makes you realize you're not alone. I mean, we learned about RJ, who was Jillian's partner, who was a high school basketball star, went into college, ended up getting mixed up with the wrong crowd, and had to drop out. And so that also gives you a larger perspective, because RJ was a very outgoing person. He talked to everybody in the group, so you knew him, and it was kind of nice to get a little bit of idea where he was coming from. But all those friendships and those things you learned, they didn't come the first week you showed up. They took time, they took energy, they took you telling a little bit of something and them telling you a little bit of something, because they're not going to tell you their whole life story if you don't tell them yours. So that was something you had to be open to. So one week in particular, we went to an abandoned building in Cincinnati and over the Rhine, and the men were not with us. The men had traveled to the coast to clean up after Hurricane Sandy. They really stressed service as part of the Exodus program, which the men were in. And so we were looking at this abandoned building, that the floors were kind of messed up, the staircases, certain areas you couldn't go up them. It was really cool, but it was kind of sad the men weren't there. So the next week we had the opportunity to talk to them about what they missed and what we missed. And it was kind of that unique parallel that they were cleaning up after Mother Nature, and we were looking and photographing something that humans had ruined. And so, quickly, before you knew it, the program ended. This is a picture of Larry and I from the final exhibition that had our pictures that Mrs. Shunk will tell you about later. But New Voices, when it ended, it wasn't the end of our relationship. We became friends, and I wasn't just going to say goodbye because, our week had passed and whatever. So we started writing. I wrote him about every month, told him about what was going on in my life, kind of what was going on in the normal world. They're stuck in this building, and they can't really talk to a lot of different people. So we just kind of provide them a little bit of entertainment, things like that. But one week I sent him a letter, and it got returned to me. And you kind of have that sinking feeling in your heart that, why it was returned to you. And so I sent another one, hoping and praying I just, messed up the address, and I got that one back too. And so it was this like devastating feeling that he wasn't there, and you don't really know where he is. I have this hope that he's out there somewhere in just another organization, that City Gospel Mission and the Exodus program was not the right place for him, but you don't know, and I probably will never know where he is. And that's really hard, and I'd probably do anything just to have one more conversation, just tell him, like, good luck. But, you know, that's not how it works. That's New Voices for you. You form these relationships, and they are the greatest relationships, and they change your life. And you'll probably never regret them, but you're left with sometimes only the memories, and you don't get to see them graduate. You don't get to talk to them again, but you still know that you had an impact in their life, and they had one in yours. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it back over to David.
Okay, very cool stories. I have another very quick activity for you all, just for another couple of minutes. Just getting back to the idea of photography for a second, and this could really apply to any creative discipline. When you're working with somebody else to make art, to write, to photograph, to paint, whatever you're doing. The way we're looking at photography in this instance is in a very symbolic kind of way. The images are initially created very impulsively, and what I mean by that is that we go out, we photograph, we're collecting lots and lots of images, maybe 50, 100 images for every time we go out. I'm encouraging students to look at these things in a very free kind of way. I'll give them some kind of visual prompt, and then they'll just take it from there. The more images, the better. So just as an example of how we come back and look at those photographs in reflection and find some meaning in them, I have a couple of images up here to show you. This particular image, when you just look at it for the first time very quickly, it looks kind of like a mistake, right? Like something that would happen like if you didn't have the camera set correctly or if you weren't looking through the camera the right way. It's just a light kind of blowing out the entire frame of the camera. This was an image taken by a student who had experienced some very difficult circumstances, life circumstances. He was about 17, 18 at the time. When I asked him to go back and reflect on this image with a specific kind of prompt, which was, think about how this relates to your life. Is there anything in your life that you can think of that has any kind of connection to this image? This is what he came up with. He had been actually incarcerated for part of his life and then had come out of that and was in school and kind of getting back on his feet. And to him, this represented that turning point. And in his mind, it all happened in a flash. It was a moment of revelation for him when he realized he was going down the wrong path and was deciding to turn all that around. So that was the connection he made with this image, which to our eyes, I think, could mean absolutely nothing. One other image that had some meaning for him, and again, this kind of looks like a mistake photographically. It's not a very clear image. I think it's very expressive, though. This was his decision to accept help, to get back on his feet. How is he going to turn his life around? Once he's decided to get back on the right path, how is he going to do that? He's going to learn how to accept help from other people. And that was the connection that he made with this image. So very, very kind of symbolic. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and keep going here. We've got one more short presentation here before we break. But instead of going around table by table, I'm just going to repeat a couple of the things that I heard and that we picked up on as we were just walking around. Somebody was talking about a telephone board where if you take out one connection, it can mess up the entire thing, and how there's some fragility to life and things can be so easily disrupted. So that one went from 0 to 60 really fast. That conversation became really interesting, and I could see how that could really involve some interesting ideas in conversation with other people. I heard somebody talking about having lived somewhere in Minnesota and how, was that at this table? how there were some images that reminded them of that time in their life, and again, could be a really interesting starting point for a conversation with somebody else about just who you are and what you think and where you come from in life. So that's exactly how we do it. That's exactly how it works. These are starting points for conversation, and they can either go from 0 to 60 really fast in terms of really talking about big philosophical issues, or they can just start with, here's who I am. And it can just serve as kind of an icebreaker to something that gets bigger than that. But in the interest of time, I want to turn it over to Janelle Shunk, who's going to talk about how this program works at her school.
Good morning, everybody. It's strange to not be able to use my teacher voice, right? I'm used to yelling to the back of the room. The reason why I wanted New Voices at Milford was strictly because it provides an authentic audience for my students. So I'm blessed to be in the position of teaching photography all day long, every day, to close to 1,300 students a year. So I have a really large population of students. And this was a way for me to just engage my students in a deep learning experience. So in the classroom, we're working on things. We have some art students over here. You do projects for a week, maybe 2 weeks, and then you move on. So New Voices, in my classroom, we were able to extend that duration and really dig into what art is and all of those things that you guys discussed, communication, expressing yourself. It really became a way for them to engage with the subject matter that they were learning how to love. In our classroom, we're teaching a lot of skills-based things with the camera, a lot of technical terms that Brittany was kind of throwing around. This is one of the prompts that resulted from David kind of explaining camera movement and how to zoom in while you're taking photographs. And we do this in my classroom, but this photograph ultimately resulted in this image, which has intense meaning because our students were able to connect and go through a process with their adult partner. You can almost like see the process happening. Oh, I have this tattoo of this cross on my back. And so they're kind of able to pull together symbols and ideas and subject matter in a new way. And I'm not able to do that in my classroom strictly because of numbers and because of time. The students are also reflecting about their work, so the exact same process that you just went through, they're doing that with their adult partners. And through this process, they're learning what works, what doesn't work, some failures, some successes. They're discussing these things and communicating them with each other. And because of that, the students in New Voices often excel to the top of our art program. So they're the students that are moving on to AP classes. They're the students that are being recognized at competitions that we participate in simply because they're photographing so much. They're gaining skills, they're reflecting on what they're doing. So academically, our New Voices students are rising to the top. In addition to art, we are also blessed to be learning across the curriculum. And I think that sometimes in high schools in particular, that's difficult because we're so content specific. And this photograph of Monica up on the board was one of the residents we were working with. This happened during the government shutdown this year. And the residents we were working with were having a really hard time obtaining documents that they needed to secure housing. And this was the last day of the program, and Monica received in the mail her birth certificate. And everybody screamed and ran to her, and it was this really powerful moment. And in the classroom, the social studies teachers are teaching about the government shutdown. My girls learned about the government shutdown. They're also doing, like David said, college essays. I'm in charge of scholarships at our school, and I don't think I've read one paper from a New Voices student where they weren't sharing their experiences with the scholarship committees. They're also writing English papers, doing timed AP writings, simply because they have something to talk about. Milford is a little bit of a bubble. Maggie said we live about 35 miles outside of the city of Cincinnati. My students don't identify themselves as Cincinnatians. They see Cincinnati as a place where you get to go to the zoo and you get to go check out a baseball game. They don't connect at all. Our population is majority upper middle class white. over the Rhine is 50% poverty and majority African American. So our students in Milford aren't able to connect with diverse cultures. They don't connect with people of diverse experiences. They aren't able to hear those stories firsthand, which is why this program has been so successful. One of the ladies back here asked about curriculum earlier. This is an after-school program for us. And David kind of sets up these programs, but then the kids really run with it. So they're the ones that are kind of deciding that maybe homelessness is the issue that they really want to tackle, or drug addiction is what they really want to explore. So within the program that we're creating, they're taking ownership of what it is that they want to do. This is a student reflection. I do videos with my students. I lock them in a closet. I call it the real world confessions, and give them 10 prompts to kind of talk through, just as a way to impulsively respond. I don't want them going to Google and figuring out how to spell something or rewording something. I want it to be very impulsive. And so this video, which is going to be on the GSN network, will show you an example of one of the student reflections. The girls are wearing their sweatshirts today, which also became a reflection for the students. I had kids in my classroom before school at lunch designing sweatshirts. This was a way for us to give back to the residents we were working with. So we were able to provide them with something new. It wasn't a hand-me-down. It wasn't we were collecting donations. We were giving them a shirt that was meaningful to the experience that we had. I feel like I'm flying through this. We're short on time. Parental involvement is really important. We, as a teacher, to win over the hearts of parents and say, I'm going to take your kids once a week on a bus to a very statistically divided city or space within our city is a scary proposition for parents. And this year I collected parent reflections because I wanted to hear what was happening within families. And this parent reflection is expressing that it gave the parent and child something to talk about. Teenagers aren't going to open up to parents. And this provided a dialogue for the families. The biggest challenge that I had as a teacher was with safety issues. That's what the school was most concerned about. They required me to bus our students to over the Rhine, which is where we were working, which is about 35 miles. We were the first program, I believe, working with David where the students weren't able to drive. This is a huge cost. And so I started grant writing, and a lot of organizations came together to make busing happen for us. So over 12 weeks, our budget for busing alone is close to $2,000, which is a lot of money to be raised. This is pictures from our final exhibition. Last year, our final exhibition, our superintendent actually showed up. I was completely floored to win over the support of our superintendent. And he came and he saw how deep of an experience this was for our kids. This is one of the panels as well from our first group. So it has reflective writing. It has transcribed video reflections in written words, and then also their photographs. And we were able to install 14 panels from our final exhibition in the halls of Milford, which has just extended that dialogue between kids. Our kids are a little bit quarantined into this area in the morning before our warning bell rings. And they stand around and they read what our students did. And it's really pulling together the communities. Kids are talking that Over the Rhine isn't a scary place and that we are Cincinnatians. Just because we're 35 miles away, they're starting to identify themselves in a new way.